Okay, good morning children. Today you have science and we are doing the chapter of pollination. Now children, in our previous class, what you have learned? You have learned the 4 different parts of a flower, isn't it? And they are calyx, corolla, androecium and gynoecium. And what you have learned? You have learned the 2 terms like complete flower and incomplete flower. Complete flower means the flower which has all the 4 parts. If the flower has calyx, corolla, androecium and gynoecium, then that flower is a complete flower. But if, what is incomplete flower? If 1 or 2 of these parts are missing, then that flower is incomplete flower, right? Incomplete means if the flower has only calyx, corolla and androecium, or if the flower has only calyx, corolla and gynoecium. And you know, out of these 4 parts, the male reproductive part is the androecium and the female reproductive part is the gynoecium, right? And the androecium, it has 2 parts like anther and filament, and each member is called stamen. So once you see the word stamen, it is androecium, the male reproductive part of a flower. And on the other hand, gynoecium has 3 parts, right? Stigma, style and ovary, and gynoecium is the female reproductive part, and each member is called carpels or pistil. So these you have learned in the previous class. Now children, based on the presence of the reproductive part in a flower, the flower are divided into 2 types. One is bisexual flower and the other one is unisexual flower. Okay, so what does this mean? Actually, on the basis of the presence of male or female part, let me tell you one thing, like flower, they are also, or you will, in case of the flowers, sometimes you will find some flowers are male only, some flowers are female only, and in some flowers you will find both male and female part. So based on the presence of these reproductive male and female reproductive part, flowers are divided into 2 types. One is bisexual flower and the other one is unisexual flower. Now bisexual flower means, what type of flower is a bisexual flower? Bi means 2. So bisexual flower means the flower which has all the 4 parts and which has both male and female parts. Which means the flower, if the flower has calyx, corolla, androecium and gynoecium. Androecium, which is the male part, gynoecium, which is the female part. So if the flower has both this male and the female part together with calyx and corolla, then that flower is called bisexual flower. And the examples of bisexual flower are hibiscus, rose, other flowers are also there. So these hibiscus and rose, these flowers, they have both male and female reproductive organ. Okay, both androecium and gynoecium, both stamen and pistils. Then what is unisexual flower? Now uni means 1. So if the flower has either androecium or gynoecium, which means if the flower has calyx, corolla and androecium, then that flower is the male flower and that flower is called unisexual flower. Since this flower, they don't have gynoecium. And again, the flower is female flower if the flower has calyx, corolla and gynoecium, where gynoecium is the female reproductive part. And that type of flower which contains either male or female reproductive part, then that type of flower is called unisexual flower. And the examples of unisexual flower are cucumber, papaya, pumpkin. These are unisexual flower. Unisexual flower means they'll have calyx, corolla and androecium, or calyx, corolla and gynoecium. Alright. Then comes the word pollination. Now what do you mean by the term pollination? Now pollination, it is the act Okay, pollination, it is the act or it is the process where anther will be transferred to stigma. Now children, you have already learned the 4 parts of a flower, where androecium is the male part and it has 2 parts, anther and filament. Okay, let me write out here. It's not stigma. Anther and filament, which are the main reproductive part. Right, and the other part, which is called pistil or gynoecium, it has 3 parts, stigma, style and ovary, which are the female part of a flower. Right. So what happens in pollination, since this anther, it is one of the part of the male reproductive organ, this anther contains small grain like structures which are called pollen grains. And these pollen grains contain the male gamete or the male egg. So when these pollen grains are transferred from anther, from the male part, to the stigma, which is the female part, then the process of transferring of pollen grains from anther to stigma, that process is called pollination. Alright, so stigma, since it is one of the female part, so this stigma, it is the topmost part of the pistil and it is sticky in nature and it is the receptor of pollen grains. So the pollen grains will be transferred from anther to stigma and they will land it out here, and these pollen grain will contain the male egg. Okay, so children, why do you think it is necessary for the pollen grains to be transferred from anther to stigma? Why do you think it is important? Now, since the aim or the goal of all the living organisms, including plants, plants are also living organisms, is to produce their offsprings, the young plants, their babies, right? So, to produce the young plant, the anther, from the anther, the pollen grain, which is the male egg, will transfer to stigma. Then from the stigma, that male egg will be united with the female egg in the ovary, which again you will learn later, okay? And they will form the seed. The formation of seed will take place. And once the seeds are formed, then only the new plants will grow from that seed. Okay? So, now who do you think will transfer the pollen grains from anther to stigma? How do they transfer? Who will do that? Now, it can be done by some of the agents. And the agents are water, wind, animals, birds, insects. They will transfer the pollen grains from anther to stigma. Okay? So, this is all about pollination. So, what is pollination? It is the process of the transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma. That is called pollination. So, thank you children. Next class.